Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Lewiston City Council workshop portion of our meeting. At this point, we don't expect any public comments, so you can go ahead and bring everybody in and we'll begin. Is there anything I'm missing that I need to say before workshop? I don't see anything. We're good, right, Kathy?
I think, yes, I think you're all set. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Is there anyone else coming in, or is this it?
Sherry Blumenthal is joining as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Matt?
Hi, Sherry.
Okay, great.
Okay. So we're ready to go. Julia, are you going to take the lead here? Or?
Actually, Sherry is going to take the lead.
Okay. So if you could just introduce yourself, what organization you're with, and you're all set to go. Welcome.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sherry Blumenthal, and I'm the Community Programs Manager with the St. Mary's Nutrition Center. The Nutrition Center was the original applicant for the Local Foods, Local Places Technical Assistance Program and lead for the local steering committee.
And I'm Julia Harper. I'm the coordinator for the Good Food Council of Lewiston-Auburn. And together, Sherry and I are part of the coordinating team that's overseeing the implementation phase of the Local Foods, Local Places Community Action Plan. And we want to thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present this evening. And I also just wanted to check that you have access to the slides that we provided. Are folks able to see those?
Julia, if you'd like, Matt can put those up now. Would you like those up now?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great, Matt, we'll work on that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So we can head to the next slide.
Great. So next slide. Thank you. We'd like to begin with providing a brief background of Local Foods, Local Places and the process that led up to today. Local Foods, Local Places, referred to moving forward as LFLP, is a national technical assistance program sponsored by the USDA and EPA, and in 2019 was supported by the Northern Borders Regional Commission. LFLP aims to support projects that create livable, walkable, economically vibrant main streets and mixed-use neighborhoods, boost economic opportunities for local farmers and Main Street businesses, and improve access to healthy local food. More than 100 communities across the country have participated in LFLP and continue to share best practices and findings through a national learning community. In the spring of 2019, the St. Mary's Nutrition Center applied and was selected to participate in LFLP. With the support from a technical assistance team made up of federal officials, the NC formed a steering committee of community stakeholders, including Lewiston's Economic Development Specialist, Misty Parker. Together, we planned and executed a 2-day conversation and workshop, and then finalized the outcome of the workshop, a community action plan. Next slide. Here is a look at the community conversation and workshop, which occurred in October of 2019 at the Agora Grand. The 2-day event brought together more than 80 community members across municipal, business, and agricultural sectors to envision a more robust local food system and economy for the LA region. The event kicked off with a tour of farms and food businesses across Lewiston and Auburn with the technical assistance team and steering committee. This was followed by an evening of community visioning and then by a day-long planning session and workshop. The outcome of the event was a draft action plan developed by event attendees through a participatory and community-driven process. You can see Appendix C for more photos of the LFLP event. Next slide, please. It is important to note at this moment the converging factors that led up to LFLP action plan in LA. Lewiston-Auburn has a rich history of and a renewed interest in livable, walkable, vibrant downtowns. The region is a unique mix of urban and rural with small to mid-sized farms within 10 miles of the urban core. Next slide. In the last 15 years, there has been a rebirth of the downtowns with tremendous energy going towards increasing community engagement and supporting revitalization and planning efforts across neighborhoods. Examples of this include the Downtown Neighborhood Action Plan, completed in 2009, which fostered broader, more creative interaction and discussion surrounding Lewiston's downtown neighborhood. Legacy Lewiston Comprehensive Plan of 2017, which lays out a number of health, education, and economic development goals connected to local food strategies, including a recommendation to celebrate local foods as a centerpiece of the city's identity and sense of place. And of course, more recently, the Choice Neighborhoods Planning and Action Grant from HUD that fostered the creation of a transformation plan with the goal of revitalizing distressed subsidized housing and building a healthier community. There has also been a significant amount of energy put toward understanding our local food landscape and building greater food security. Next slide. Some of this energy has been channeled into efforts like community food assessment, the community food assessment of 2013, led by Nutrition Center, which catalyzed the launch of the Good Food Council of Lewiston-Auburn and assessed food security landscape of downtown Lewiston. The multi-year planning process of the City of Auburn to enhance the agricultural natural resource zone that culminated in 2019 and led to the formation of an agricultural committee. And the first in-state community food charter pioneered by the Good Food Council in 2016 to build shared values and commitments to a thriving food system. And the first in Maine and sold out regional land access and food economy conference hosted in Auburn in March 2019, which brought together farm owners, farm seekers, agricultural service providers, and community and economic development officials to build connections and seek solutions. LFLP was an opportunity to continue the momentum built by all these efforts. Next slide, please. The previous research and planning, along with concurrent development, led us to better understand the region's assets, along with opportunities to grow the local food system and center it as a driving force of the local economy. In addition to long-standing family farms with both food producing and agricultural recreation traditions, we have fledgling farms forming within and along the edges of the urban core, and a growing community of beginner and seasoned farmers. There are not only existing and potential reinvestment opportunities in the downtowns of both cities, but 60% of the state's population live and work within a 20-mile radius of LA, helping to create a strong untapped market for locally produced goods and services. These assets and opportunities were at the forefront of the LFLP planning process and helped to shape the final community action plan. Please see Appendix A, page 37 for more regional assets and opportunities as outlined during the event. Next slide.
Sorry, I was muted. The LFLP action plan finalized in January of 2019 serves as a record of a community planning process, a vision of what makes a robust regional food system, a roadmap to help our community grow and strengthen local food and farms, an opportunity to align and coordinate local initiatives, and a powerful tool for advocacy and to leverage funding and other resources. Please note that Appendix E in the plan includes a list of fundraising resources. The plan captures the local food vision of those 80+ attendees to the workshops last October and crystallizes it into 16 action steps that, along with numerous individual, business, organizational, and municipal commitments, aim to fulfill the following 4 goals. Next slide, please. Goal 1 is to strengthen access to local food while expanding market opportunities and infrastructure for farm and food businesses. There are 5 actions under this goal that range from conducting a feasibility study to determine the demand and need for a farming and food processing infrastructure to finding a permanent home for the Lewiston Farmers Market. Next slide, please. Goal 2 is to integrate local food and agriculture into city planning and economic development strategies. There are 4 actions under this goal that range from passing urban agriculture ordinances in both cities to developing a regional food and ag sector strategy that supports economic growth. Next slide, please. Goal 3 is to build food and agriculture as a defining brand identity for Lewiston and Auburn. There are 2 actions under this goal, and the leads are the LA Metro Chamber and the Good Food Council. These actions aim to co-create a local food and ag brand identity for Lewiston-Auburn through a community-driven process, and to develop and implement a marketing strategy that includes a Buy Local Foods campaign that will support local food producers, increase the availability of and access to local foods, and to support the local economy as a whole. Next slide, please. Goal 4 is to increase equitable access, ownership, and preservation of land to grow food in Lewiston-Auburn. There are 4 actions under this goal that range from increasing awareness among landowners and land seekers about organizations that support land access, transfer, and preservation, to assisting New Roots Cooperative Farm, the Somali Bantu Community Association, and other potential farmland seekers to purchase and secure farmland, as well as to record the process of securing land so that it may be used by other land seekers. Next slide, please. We want to take a moment to focus on the top actions where we see the city of Lewiston would play a unique role in the next 1 to 3 years. We envision the LFLP plan will have a 3 to 5 year lifespan. Each action in the plan is time-bound, has a lead or a champion tied to the action, as well as measures of success. All of this was determined at the LFLP event by participants with the understanding that they would be adapted as needed. And for example, of course, at this moment, COVID-19 is a need for adaptation. This chart, also in your packet, references the page number where each action can be found in the full plan, who the leads are, and what the status is, the current status of each action. The first action listed is 2.3, pass urban ag ordinances in Lewiston and Auburn. The leads for this action are the Good Food Council, Shelley Norton, land use planner at AvCog, and Jesse Tannenbaum of Eli's Homestead Urban Farm. Urban agriculture means the raising of crops and animals in an urban environment to increase access to healthy foods, support healthy living, foster community connectivity, and provide economic opportunities on vacant and underutilized land. The status of this action is in the early stages. The leads of the action have begun preliminary background research on urban ag ordinances in other cities nationally, are exploring promising funding opportunities to further support the cities and community partners in this work, and have connected with city staff to explore these partnerships. The second is action 2.4, develop a regional economic growth strategy to support agricultural production, processing, distribution, to grow the ag sector and to bring new businesses and jobs, for example, new farmers. The leads of this action are Shanna Cox and Scott Benson of the LA Metro Chamber. This action is about developing a regional food and ag sector strategy that supports economic growth. The status is in the early stages, and as an initial step, the Chamber has already prioritized food and agriculture businesses and infrastructure within their existing loan pools. For next steps, the Chamber is eager to partner with both cities and is interested to convene conversations following this presentation and conversation. The third action listed is 2.1, pass Food Sovereignty Act in Lewiston. The leads for this action are the Good Food Council, Jesse Tannenbaum of Eli's Homestead Urban Farm, who is also a member of the Good Food Council. Maine's 2017 Food Sovereignty Act aims to localize food systems by allowing municipalities to regulate food production, processing, consumption, and producer-to-consumer exchanges. It allows homeowners and farmers to sell non-meat products out of their home without having to receive a license from the state, and thus reduces the financial and regulatory burden on many small producers who sell dairy products, baked and canned goods, cider, and other value-added foods direct to consumer. The City of Auburn has passed a food sovereignty ordinance in 2017. The status is also in the early stages. The leads of this action have begun research on the impact of food sovereignty in Maine, analysis of Lewiston's current relevant ordinances, and have outreach to city staff and food producers in Lewiston for feedback. The Good Food Council looks forward to bringing a version of Food Sovereignty Act to the Lewiston City Council in the near future for consideration. Next slide, please. We want to acknowledge efforts by the City of Lewiston, which are in alignment with the LFLP goals. These include the Legacy Lewiston Comprehensive Plan with inclusion of food goals as outlined by Sherry earlier. Last year, the city adopted the Choice Neighborhoods Transformation Plan, which includes nutritious food access strategies. The city has also given ongoing in-kind support to the Lewiston Farmers Market. The city has worked with St. Mary's Nutrition Center to pass a supportive community gardening ordinance in 2012. And two efforts not listed here include edible fruit trees were added to the city's tree bait program in 2017, which applies a rebate to the property owner's storm water bill for purchasing and planting trees on single family and duplex properties. And the city also supported in-kind support for Edible Lisbon Street, an effort championed by Healthy Androscoggin that and supported by local businesses that paired veggie boxes and educational information to promote curiosity about fresh food and local farms in the downtown. Next slide, please. We request that the City Council adopts the Local Foods, Local Places Action Plan, which is community-driven and recognizing that the plan is a snapshot of a moment in time and that the 16 actions of the plan will continue to be adapted based on community need and circumstance. In the resolution, we request the city acknowledges that the LFLP plan is in alignment with the Lewiston-Auburn Community Food Charter that was adopted by resolution by the City Council in 2016, and that investment into local food will result in increased food security and expansion of our local economy. We also request that the city advocates for the plan, and a way to do this would be to encourage city residents, officials, and locally based businesses and organizations to engage and help further the LFLP action plan's goals. Next slide, please. We thank you so much for your time and consideration, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Mr. Mayor, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Hey, it's me supposed to be telling you guys that. Thank you very much, Sherry and Julia. And we also received quite a bit of information in our packet as well. I'll open it up to the council for any questions. Councilor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Julia and Sherry. So as I was reading through this, it kind of piqued my curiosity about food sovereignty. And Lewiston does have an ordinance on the books, section 2245, with exemptions to licensing, where persons selling exclusively farm, dairy, orchard, or fish products or their own productions shall not be required to obtain a local license. What further steps do we need to take to have food sovereignty on the books in your perspectives?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Ed had also pointed that out to us. And the primary thing that we think needs to happen is that it doesn't include value-added products. So those cans, jams and jellies, those kinds of things are not a raw product. So it seems like the raw product is what is covered in Lewiston's ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that.
So it may be primarily just that, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to Sherry and Julia for the great presentation. They've done a lot of good work, and there's a lot of good people involved in this. So I actually got to participate in one of the days back in October, which is really cool. I guess I'd be supportive of adopting a lot of these ideas. I'm looking at the agricultural ordinances in the city. I'm not an expert on that by any means, but I'm absolutely open to looking into that, ways we can make it better. And I guess just keeping the conversation going about how we can develop more economic opportunities for people in the city in regards to agriculture. So I'm definitely supportive of moving this conversation forward and maybe adopting the LFLP plan. And if it comes down to some buyer beware, I think people are pretty aware of the risk, and or the city's willing to open up the door to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting presentation. I would think from what I'm hearing, one thing that we might be able to do, we could direct staff to look at amending our ordinance to include those value-added products that have been mentioned. It sounds to me like a very reasonable thing, considering the origin of the products, and I can't see where anybody would object to that, but I'm sure that minds greater than mine can look into that and figure it all out. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? 1 second, Ed. So I'm kind of excited about the work that you're going to be doing with the chamber on the economic development side of this subject. I'll be interested to see how that plays out and what actually comes out of that. That's exciting to me. I have one quick question about the goal with using the middle school kitchen for job training and other community-wide meals that feature locally sourced ingredients. Have you had any conversations with the schools yet?
Yes. So Alyssa Roman was tagged as the lead on that, and we had a conversation and determined that she wouldn't be the appropriate lead. And we've had conversations since then that have kind of morphed that action, and we think it will probably, elements of it will be combined into other actions. Like the spirit of it may stay the same in terms of trying to get more locally produced food into schools and creating infrastructure for farmers and food producers in the downtown. But that the sort of, as it was originally envisioned, it's currently, we're calling it on hold at the current moment in time.
Okay. I would, I'd encourage it at some point, if it begins to move forward again, to get in front of the school committee and introduce them to that concept early on in the process. I think that would be helpful. Ed, do you have some thoughts?
I'll let Dennis go first, because I was just going to bring everybody up to speed with what would happen next.
Okay.
So I just wanted to comment. We did have an attendee looking to make a comment. They've lowered their hand. It was Jesse Tannenbaum was looking to speak. So I don't know if you wanted to allow that, Mayor. Just wanted to bring that up.
So I think Jesse's intimately involved. Usually we don't allow any other comment during workshops. We save it for the, the council meeting, but I think Jesse's been pretty intimately involved. So if he's there, let's bring him in for a moment. We have about 6 minutes left, so.
Jesse, if you can hear us, you are able to speak now.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to point out that that ordinance that's on the books also doesn't take into consideration that some of those producers may be selling in a zone that doesn't allow selling as well. So that's something that may also need to be considered.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. All right, Ed.
Yeah, one real quick comment. I do know that AvCog and the chamber, and to some extent our own economic development people, have worked on some of these issues for a number of years, and we see it as a potential area for economic growth and development, particularly in terms of food processing and distribution, and also as a way to potentially revitalize the rural areas surrounding our community. With all that said, the plan then would be to bring this forward for the council to adopt the plan at its meeting on June 2nd. So we'll put something together and bring it on the agenda and have it set up for them.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Julia or Sherry? Are you all set?
We're good. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much.
All right,
Nice
thank
to
you.
see everybody.
All right, have a great evening.
You too.
Okay, folks, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title 1, Section 4056/C to discuss an economic development issue of which a premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the city. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Clement, seconded by Councilor Khalid. Okay. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4, Counselor from Ward 4, I think you're muted. Thank
There
you,
we
Mike.
go. Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Counselor from Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
and Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, we'll see you all in the executive session meeting. Thank you. All right, looks like we're all present. And we're live, ready to go, right? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Lewiston City Council business meeting. A few quick items regarding meeting logistics before we get started. This session is being conducted remotely, and members will only participate electronically. Public comment on any item apparent on the agenda may be sent to publiccomment@lewistonmaine.gov prior to or during the meeting, and all comments received will be forwarded to the City Council. Members of the public who are logged into the meeting online can also make a comment when invited to do so by using the raise your hand button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Once they are acknowledged, their microphone will be unmuted and they will be invited to make a brief comment. Before making comments, please state your name and the town of your residence. Members of the public who are joining the meeting by phone can press *9 to raise your hand. Counselors are asked to raise your hands to make comments throughout the meeting. And at this point, we'll ask our city clerk to please take a roll call for attendance, and then we'll begin the meeting.
Sure. Counselor from Ward 3,
Present.
Ward 4,
Here.
Ward 5,
Present.
Ward 6,
Present.
Ward 7,
Present.
Ward 1,
Here.
Ward 2.
Present.
Also participating in this meeting is Mayor Kayer, City Administrator Ed Barrett, Deputy City Administrator Dennis Dote, myself as the City Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The first order of business this evening will be an update on city actions regarding COVID-19 pandemic situation and the city reopening plan, and our Deputy City Administrator Dennis Dote will present.
Good evening, councilors. Just provide a brief update on latest activities around COVID-19 and our response. Last week, we were alerted from some local healthcare providers to a growing concern around an increase in cases within our community. Since that time, staff, myself, Ed Barrett, and the mayor have been working with local organizations, hospitals, and the Maine CDC to organize a coordinated response should we continue to see these increases. Part of our first initial conversations with the CDC identified that one area that we needed to immediately begin working on was housing needs, isolation and quarantine needs. Some families within our downtown area in particular were to be needed. So we are working with the Maine Housing Authority and DHHS to work with the local hotel to identify or work through that. And we're hoping to have some updates on that in the coming days. We also are updating our messaging to our community. Since the beginning of this, since mid-March, we've really been putting out videos, print material, social media, information out there related to social distancing, ways the community to comply with the various orders. We're updating that information. We're trying to I guess tweak some of that messaging in an effort to reach more folks in the community. Related to City Hall specifically, we are open again by appointment only. We started this on Monday. Things seem to be going well, and we are able to provide the services. I still encourage the public, even though we are open by appointment, to utilize our online services by mail. We are still trying to limit that face-to-face interaction whenever possible, but certainly if folks do need to, they can come in through an appointment. And lastly, you'll see on the agenda, we do have an item that is a part of our local economic recovery plan, and we'll be looking for the council to take consideration regarding some waivers of fees and policies involving the public right away, again, as part of our overall plan and first steps. That's all I have at this point. Turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes with any changes suggested from the council.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Councilor LaJoy, seconded by Councilor Khalid. Call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
and Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, we're in the public comment period for any member of the public who would like to make comments regarding issues pertaining to Lewiston City government. Up to 3 minutes long for any item not on the agenda. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment?
Mayor, I'm not seeing any raised hands or any questions in our Q&A section.
Okay, since we started this Zoom type city council meetings, any point during our meeting we'll accept public comments within reason, but then also on any agenda item the public will also have an opportunity to comment as well. With that said, roll call votes.
Sure, all roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Counselor of Ward 3.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 1.
Item number 1, public hearing and final passage for rezoning the properties at 949 College Street, 2 East Merrill Road, 4 East Merrill Road, 6 East Merrill Road, 8 East Merrill Road, 10 East Merrill Road, and portions of 1 East Merrill Road, 3 East Merrill Road, and 5 East Merrill Road from the Rural Agriculture District to the Low Density Residential District. Requested action, that the proposed amendment to rezone the properties at 949 College Street, 2 East Merrill Road, 4 East Merrill Road, 6 East Merrill Road, 8 East Merrill Road, 10 East Merrill Road, and portions of 1 East Merrill Road, 3 East Merrill Road, and 5 East Merrill Road from the Rural Agricultural District to the Low Density Residential District receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So
I'll
moved.
entertain a motion.
Second.
And who moved that?
Counselor Ray.
Okay, moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor Jensen. And David Hediger is here to briefly present on this. We did workshop this recently. So David, do you have anything you want to add?
This is the second reading for you folks. I think the information sheet says it all. It's an amendment to get all the properties in one subdivision into a single zoning district. It also addresses a setback issue that the petitioner, David Langelier, had. This will improve his situation. It will also put all the subdivision into one zoning district, so they're all subject to the same zoning and setback requirements, just adding to the consistency of that neighborhood that exists out there today.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from councilors? And I'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the public is welcome to comment on this. Not seeing any raised hands, with a reminder that at any point, if someone wasn't able to get in quick enough, just raise your hand and we'll acknowledge that. With no public comments, I'll bring it back to the council. If nothing, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, please.
Item number 2, public hearing and order directing consolidation of polling locations for the July 14th, 2020 state and municipal election. There are 2 items for requested action. The first item is to conduct a public hearing to receive citizen input and comments regarding the proposal to consolidate the city polling places for the July 14th, 2020 election. That doesn't require a motion or a vote, Mr. Mayor, so you can simply just open the hearing for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing is now open. If there's anyone wishing to comment from the public. Okay, seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Is there any comments or questions from the council? Again, this item was recently workshopped. Councilor Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we spoke about this last, we were still awaiting a determination, I believe, from the Secretary of State. Have we received communication back from them yet?
We have not. So I reached out today to Senator Libby asking if he could assist us regarding some of that communication at the State House with the governor's office, and he said he'd be happy to help reach out on our behalf.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Khalid?
Kathy, will this come back to the council for a vote?
Well, it would actually be done right now, Counselor. So there are 2 items for requested action on the agenda cover sheet for this item. The first one was to conduct the public hearing, and then the second one is to adopt the order. So if everyone's all set, we could have that motion made, Mr. Mayor, whatever direction you'd like to take.
Nope, that's fine. I mean, I'll quickly, any other questions or comments while we're in this phase? Councilor Khalid?
Thank you. Just several points that I want to make before we take on the vote. One, we need to look at other options. Again, I've said this in the workshop before. We can't have social distancing when we're all voting, when the entire city is voting in one place. The second thing is maybe like requesting from the public volunteers to help with the poll workers issue. So we may get, if we ask for, volunteers, we may get people who are interested, young people who may be interested in helping us at the poll locations. Third, we shouldn't depend on additionally low turnout when we should be giving all possible opportunities for our residents to vote. And lastly, unfortunately, we're not thinking about our new Mainers population, where they don't usually use absentee ballots because of barriers such as language barrier. And because of that, I will not be supporting this.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Khalid. Councilor Ray?
Sorry, oh, okay, I'm unmuted. So similar to Councilor Khalid, I will not be supporting this for reasons we talked about last week as well as tonight. I find that We don't yet have approval from Secretary of State, which is a little disappointing that they haven't responded. I understand that's no fault of the city, but not having that guidance makes me really uncomfortable, on top of the fact that I think there are potentially more poll workers in our community now, as folks are looking for temporary positions that they might be able to supplement their income with, or other situations. So I'm not as worried about poll workers, but I'm also not the one recruiting them. Ms. Fonteo, I know you are, so I do want to be sensitive to that. But as we saw during the most recent polling at the presidential primary, there are just a lot of unknowns, especially in the time of COVID-19. And so I'm not going to be supporting this tonight, but I will do everything I can to help the city get the word out about absentee ballots in advance of the actual date.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Ray. Anything you'd like to respond to, Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just another reminder for councilors that we have the 4 buildings that we use for polling places. 2 of those buildings are currently not available due to COVID-19 programs. The Green Ladle and their food preparation, and the Armory with the wellness shelter for the homeless folks. So we're down 50% of our buildings already. So we really do feel that we need to consolidate, irregardless of the issue of staffing. We don't have the buildings that we can utilize. So that is creating the concern for us. And I will just clarify for Councilor Ray, I may have misspoken. At this point, what we're looking for is the waiver of the 90-day period, that time frame. That needs to come from the governor's office. The Secretary of State's office has already told us that they are supportive of us consolidating, and they will approve it once we submit the paperwork. And the order is written tonight to be contingent upon the waiver by the governor's office. So I apologize if I misspoke. We are waiting for the state to act, but it's the governor's office. The Secretary of State's office has already given us their conditional thumbs up on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Clement, seconded by Councilor Jelinas. Call the roll.
Council from Ward 3.
Sorry, did we, oh my gosh, we're voting on the second part of, what part are we voting on right now? Sorry, could you just reread the motion?
It's to adopt the order for item number 2.
Okay, no.
The actual order.
No is my vote, sorry.
Thank you, Councilor. Council from Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Ward 1.
No.
And Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by vote of 5-2.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3.
Item number 3, order authorizing the city administrator to execute a memorandum of agreement between the City of Lewiston and the Garcelon Cemetery Association. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the city administrator to execute a memorandum of agreement between the City of Lewiston and the Garcelon Cemetery Association.
So moved.
I move.
All right, moved by Councilor Jensen, and I need to figure out who seconded that.
I'll second that. That's in Ward 6.
Okay, very good, thank you. And Dale's listed has presented this item. Okay, good. And this item was workshopped recently.
Yes.
Okay. Dale, can you hear me? And if so, do we have some video? Thank you.
Blacked out there for a second when I came on, so. I'm sorry, did you ask a question? I blacked out for just a moment.
Yeah, if you could just briefly brief the council and the general public on agenda item number 3, please.
Absolutely. Garcelon Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in the city. It's actually some of the very first settlers who were buried in another cemetery. When that cemetery was destroyed, they were moved here. It was established in 1819, and ever since 1905, it's been maintained by the Garcelon Cemetery Association. In recent years, their membership has declined a little bit. Their ability to both fund and maintain the cemetery is not what it used to be. So we met with the previous council and they asked us to enter into an agreement. There are 2 state laws that for different reasons and in different ways indicate that the city should maintain components of this cemetery. So this memorandum of agreement is for us to begin to maintain the routine maintenance of the cemetery while the Gosselin Cemetery Association continues to do capital improvements like stone repairs, fence removal, and the larger things until they extinguish their funds. And then thereafter, they would act as a consultant to the city. So this would be the kind of transitional maintenance of this cemetery coming to the city. There are 32 veterans in this cemetery, which is one of the reasons the city is required to maintain at least some components of the cemetery.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the council? I don't see any public comments pending. If not, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 4, please.
Item number 4, resolve authorizing the acceptance of a public art installation to be located on city-owned property in or adjacent to the Lewiston Canal System. Requested action to approve the resolve authorizing the acceptance of a public art installation to be located on city-owned property in or adjacent to the Lewiston Canal System.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Ray, seconded by Councilor LaJoy. Ed? You're on mute.
Okay, the city council basically workshopped this at its last workshop meeting, and we had a presentation from the Public Art Committee that has been working for some time under a grant with the State Humanities Council on the whole issue of how to use public art and general artistic involvements in the community as an economic development mechanism. There was a plan done. That plan has been adopted by the city council. And as part of that grant, the group has funding from the state with no requirement for a local match for an art installation to be installed in Lewiston and a second one to be installed in Auburn. At the workshop, they presented an example of the art or a rendering of the art that they selected. They went through a request for proposal process, got a number of proposals, worked that down to 2. I believe the mayor and Councilor LaJoy were involved in the meeting where those artistic proposals were reviewed, and they've recommended one for the council's adoption. A picture, I guess, or a rendering of that artwork is included in your packet. It basically is a group of foxes at various locations along the cross canal, going from the upper canal to the lower canal between Bates Mill 5 and the rest of the Bates Mill complex. It's being done by an artist who's originally from Portland, who apparently is fairly well known for his artwork. They work closely with Public Works Department to make sure that the nature of the installation was workable in the canal system in that area. And the idea was to have an art piece that would be something that would attract people to the community and be a real kind of centerpiece that brings a highlight to some important element of the community, such as our canal system. As you know, the canal system is part of our long-term plans as a major amenity to add to our community that also would be a supportive of economic development. It was well received by the council, and what the action tonight would do is to basically accept the artwork and authorize its installation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? I see a hand on the right side, but I can't tell. Counselor Ray, thank you.
I was trying to draw attention to it. We spoke about this last week, but I just wanted to share additional enthusiasm as I reached out to folks saying, isn't this cool? And they verified it is cool. So I think this is just going to be the start of bringing some really great public art to that area of town and to this community. And I think it's going to spread beyond that area of town. So just so excited to be supporting this. And it's just the coolest thing ever.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5, please.
Item number 5, resolve authorizing, correcting, and assessing error on the property owned by James Guptill at 56 Jenkins Street involving the homestead exemption. Requested action to approve the resolve authorizing, correcting, and assessing error on the property owned by James Guptill at 56 Jenkins Street involving the homestead exemption.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Ray,
I'll second.
seconded by Counselor Clement. And if we can just bring in our tax assessor.
Actually, I think I'm going to do this for Bill.
Okay,
So I'll take care of it. This is a little bit of an unusual circumstance. As you know, everyone who owns a home and lives in it is eligible for a homestead exemption. Once you file for that homestead exemption, it lasts forever unless there's some reason for it to be taken away, such as you relocate or move to a new property. One of the ways that we stay on top of who is eligible or the property is eligible for a homestead is by obviously monitoring sales of property and also by monitoring death certificates so that we pick up individuals who have died who have the homestead exemption. The clerk provides those death certificates to the assessor's office, and they then update their records under the assumption that the person is no longer eligible. And all the time that's being done, we never had a situation where the clerk had a death certificate in the name of James Guptill. It turns out that there is a James Guptill Sr. and a James Guptill Jr., and it was the James Guptill Jr. who died and the James Guptill Sr. who had the homestead exemption. That mistake was made roughly 7 years ago. Actually, it was before Bill Healy's time, and it was not picked up by the property owner. Normally under state law, the requirement for bringing errors to the attention of the assessor is on the property owner. But in this instance, he actually did make some effort to try to figure out what was going on there. I think he simply just did not have enough information or understanding of the system to figure out what was going on. The bill was going to the heirs of James Guptill and the homestead was missing. He picked up the error when he did not receive the property tax rebate check that the state sent out a few months ago, based on having excess funds available in the state budget. He did not get a check there, and he started checking with the assessor, found out that he was not receiving the homestead. The assessor has the authority to correct that for the current tax year, which he did. So it has been corrected. He did receive his rebate for this year. We did also notify the state treasurer. And I don't know if the treasurer will make good on the $100 plus rebate to him through that program, but we have notified them. The assessor cannot go back beyond that. The city council can go back for an additional 2 years. So what this resolve would do is authorize us to correct his tax payment for the years of 2018 and 2019 in the amounts of $498.76 and $504.54. As noted, there's no requirement that we do this. This is time limited. Believe it or not, in Maine, we are not even legally required to issue a tax bill. So even though you don't get a tax bill, you're required to pay your taxes, and it's on you to determine that. But I think this is a situation that is so unusual, in a situation where the taxpayer did at one point try to get some clarity and did not, that I think it is worth our going ahead and providing him with the correction for those 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And I've had several conversations with Mr. Gupto, and it started as soon as I took office, and then with the pandemic, some time passed before I spoke to him a second time, and you know, listening to the story and how this proceeded, you know, he's just hoping that the city council will afford him these 2 years, and he understands that he won't be able to receive all of the years that he was overtaxed. But all right, any other questions or comments from the council? If not, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6, please.
Item number 6, resolve waiving certain fees and policies involving the public right-of-way and municipally owned property and establishing a procedure to allow for the use of private parking areas for the purpose of assisting Lewiston organizations in implementing social distancing. Requested action to approve the resolve waiving certain fees and policies involving the public right-of-way and municipally owned property and establishing a procedure to allow for the use of private parking areas and for the purpose of assisting Lewiston organizations in implementing social distancing.
Thank you.
Okay, just
Hold on, I'll
Excuse me.
entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Pettingill, seconded by Councilor Jelinas. Okay, Ed.
okay. This is one of the efforts that we've thought about and come up with to hopefully help some of our businesses as they approach reopening under what we anticipate will still be some requirements as to social distancing. Some of our folks obviously may not have a problem with social distancing. A restaurant, for example, in the outskirts may have a yard that they can easily use or an outside area, seating area that they can expand into. But a lot of our other facilities won't, particularly in our downtown area. And even in some of the areas that are not necessarily downtown, but maybe are in a shopping area where the building sits pretty much right on a parking lot. So what we're trying to do is to make it possible for those businesses to use city property, number one, such as in the downtown area, sidewalks, maybe some limited parking areas, and certainly other public spaces, such as some of our parks in the downtown area, to expand their operations into. Some of that is now allowed. There is a sidewalk occupancy permit, for example, that restaurants downtown can use the sidewalk, and usually it involves a fee, so that fee would be waived. We have not necessarily had a system that allowed them to use other areas, particularly areas in the street. So this would give some potential flexibility there, maybe to use a city parking space. There has been some discussion about potentially maybe on Friday and Saturday night closing a section of a street to allow restaurants and other operators to use that street to expand into. So that's one thing we're trying to do, is to make that possible, to waive the permit fees that are associated with that. Secondly, we do have a park use permit fee. This would also be waived for businesses who want to use some of our public spaces. As an example, we had an inquiry today about from a business that operates a exercise type operation, asking if it would be possible for them to use a city park so that they could start up their classes again. think that's something that we'd like to be supportive of. We just want to exercise a certain amount of control. So we want to make sure that people still get a permit so that we know where they're going to be and they know the rules to be there. We don't want to charge them for it because we understand they're under a lot of economic stress at this time, and just want to make sure that we can control and manage it. The other thing this would do is allow someone, as I mentioned, maybe in the outskirts who's got a building that fronts on a parking lot, to expand into that parking lot, assuming that the owner of that land, if it's someone else other than them, gives them permission. Again, we would require a permit there because we want to make sure that that expansion is done safely. So if someone's going to be expanding tables and seating areas out into a parking lot, we want to make sure that that seating area is protected against adjacent traffic. So again, no charge, just a permit. The permits for these would be granted by a committee made up of city administrator, the deputies, the city administrator, the public works director, and the director of code and planning, or their designees. So that would allow us to be sure that what we're doing is being done in an appropriate way. We're going to try to make this as simple and straightforward as possible, because we do want to make as many accommodations for businesses as we can during the period that they're operating under social distancing restrictions. All of this would continue for at least a 10-day period following the lifting of all of those restrictions, or until November 1st, 2020, whichever was first. We figure that come November, people are not likely to want to sit outside or partake outside in that kind of weather. So that's what we're proposing. We think it would be a good step to be helpful to people. And I know that the mayor has had some contacts from some restaurants, in particular in the downtown area, that feel that this would potentially make the difference between them being able to operate successfully once they reopen or not being able to do so. So we would recommend your approval.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Councilor Jelinas?
I don't really have a question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. More just a comment, just really applauding the city staff for their just creative thinking and the support of the local businesses during these really trying times. I think it's a very business-friendly move to think about fee-waived permitting at this point. And I really appreciate the ideas that you shared, Mr. Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I echo the sentiments of Councilor Jelinas. I just wanted to ask, in terms of permit tracking, will this committee be responsible for that, or will that kind of be deputized to a specific department?
Once these permits are granted, the responsibility will somewhat depend on where the operation is. If it's on city sidewalks, streets, or public spaces, it will likely be the Public Works Department, because they're the ones who deal with that area most directly. If it is on private property, such as a parking lot in front of a building, that would be the Code Enforcement Office that would be doing it. I also anticipate, usually when these kinds of things happen, if something is getting out of whack, we hear about it pretty quickly from other people. So I don't think enforcement is going to be a major issue here. We'll hear about issues as they arise. Our big concern is to make sure that we avoid conflicts and don't have inappropriate activities going on, next to each other. We're also the other change I forgot to mention is we're also allowing, if a business downtown wants to expand onto the sidewalk in front of that business, they get permission from the adjacent property owners to use their frontage. We're going to allow that as well. So theoretically, if you have a restaurant and the business next to you is a office setup, you could ask them if it would be okay to set up some tables in front of their property as well.
That's great information to have. And I think it just continues to add to the sense of this community solving problems together. So I really appreciate hearing that.
Okay, thank you. Just to make councilors aware, so when you raise your hand, for some reason this evening, I'm not able to put your hand down, so just make sure you could do that afterwards. Councilor Clement?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with my colleague from Ward 7. I think those remarks were very apropos. I think that this shows that we are trying to help, and I firmly believe we should be doing everything we can to support our business community. And as a side remark, last evening I saw something that just demonstrates the ingenuity and creativity of some of these business people. I don't know where this occurred, but it was a restaurant. They removed all their tables. They came up with like a TV tray on wheels, put a tractor inner tube around this table that gave them the 6-foot distance, and like a bunch of bumper cars, they turned these people loose and nobody could get closer than 6 feet, but they could move around, they could go out on the sidewalk. I thought that was very creative to see something like that. And I think that Maine people, and in particular Lewiston people, are of that creative nature, and given the opportunity, they will work to do things like this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, call the roll.
Counselor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 7, please.
Item number 7, resolve asking the governor of the state of Maine to reopen Androscoggin County. Requested action to approve the resolve asking the governor of the state of Maine to reopen Androscoggin County.
All right, thank you. So how I anticipate that we have some public comment on this agenda item. So how I'm going to handle this evening is I'll first ask Councilor Clement to read the resolve and share some brief comments with the council. And then I'll turn that over to public comment. Once public comment has been completed, I'm going to have some brief comments for the council, and then we'll turn it over to the council for discussion and or debate. So Councilor Clement, with that, if you could read your resolve and make any brief comments you'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, it may be a technical glitch. I did not notice the title of this particular item until I got to looking at it real closely today. I don't believe the title matches with my intent. This may be something we can fix. I think once the body of the resolve is heard and the resolution itself, the final resolution will become apparent. I'm not asking to reopen Androscoggin County, but listen up and here's what it is. This is a resolving asking the governor to reconsider her decision to include Androscoggin County in one of the 4 counties that are still continually restricted in the state. 12 of the counties have seen a relaxation. Androscoggin is one of the 4 that is not. So therefore, with that in mind, this resolution comes before the council. Whereas the city of Lewiston is currently under a gubernatorial quarantine as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas said quarantine is adversely affecting not only the economy, but also the ability of its citizens to work and their ability to maintain Maine's quality of life, thereby damaging not only the economy, but also the mental health and well-being of our residents. And whereas the state of Maine is the only state in New England to not be tabulating or quantifying data on a daily basis, and this is leading to the inability of accurately analyzing epidemiological trends. And whereas the city of Lewiston and Androscoggin County would appear to be in the same statistical position to proceed with reopening its community alongside the other Maine counties where restrictions have been lessened. And whereas it has become apparent that residents of the city of Lewiston and Androscoggin County are now routinely traveling to those areas that have seen a relaxation to obtain goods and services that cannot be obtained locally under the current restrictions. And whereas there are prophylactic strategies that will mitigate COVID-19 without having to shut down the economy and quarantine the healthy. And whereas to include Androscoggin County in the group of restricted counties is not rationally related to a virus that does not recognize geographical borders. Now, therefore, we, the City Council of the City of Lewiston, in regular session, hereby respectfully ask the Governor of the State of Maine, the Honorable Janet T. Mills, to reconsider her recent decision to include Lewiston and Androscoggin County in the 4-county group that remains subject to the strictest regulations. And we strongly recommend that virus testing be expanded as rapidly as possible and all recommended data be reported as frequently as suggested by the federal CDC so as to maximize the information available for analysis. And we ask that Governor Mills direct the Maine CDC to follow their peers and begin to release data of confirmed COVID-19 cases by town or city, and to communicate with local officials and work with them as a team. And we ask that Governor Mills consider making any quarantine a voluntary action that will further force any business to remain closed or require any to be open. And we ask that businesses that choose to open be allowed to do so under current best practice guidelines of those promulgating public health advisories. And we ask that the force of law concerning the quarantine restrictions be immediately removed. And we strongly recommend that those persons at highest risk, namely those of advanced age and or living in congregate settings and or possessing known comorbidity factors, be readily afforded such assistance as will help them to mitigate exposure. And finally, we believe Maine people are resolute and possess the necessary knowledge, will, and drive to pick up the pieces responsibly, thereby starting the all-important task of rebuilding our economy, which will contribute to our citizens' economic and mental health and well-being, and will allow us once again to become the great state of Maine. So ends the resolution. And Mr. Mayor, if I might, I will yield my time at this point. I would ask that I be allowed to speak last before the council votes.
Very good. So I'll entertain a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Clement, seconded by Councilor Pettingill. And at this time, we'll move to any public comments. And just a reminder, anyone calling in by phone has to dial *9, correct, Kathy? Okay, folks, this is the opportunity for public comments. Okay.
We do have one, Mayor. It's Patricia Gagné. I'm going to allow her to speak.
And then following her, I see Linda Scott.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Ms. Gagnon. If you have video and you'd like to put it on, please do. Otherwise, we can hear you. Yes, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I am just saying that I am in support of Councillor Clement's resolution. The governor's restrictions on the citizens of Maine are an infringement of our constitutional protections, and the Constitution should not be suspended in times of crises. And I think we must be vigilant to ensure our protections are preserved. And like Councillor Clement stated, those who are at risk or those who are uncomfortable going out to different public places, that they do stay at home and remain at home, and that is their right. So I just want to say that I am in support of Councillor Clement's resolution.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Gagnon.
Thank
you. Okay, Ms. Scott.
Hello?
Hi, Ms. Scott, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hi, this is Linda Scott from Lewiston. I would just like to say that I find this very concerning that we would want to do a resolution at this time when we are now finding that we have community spread here and we're also seeing an increase in cases. I wonder if it wouldn't be more appropriate for the council to wait a little longer to see how the other counties that are just starting to have some of the restrictions lifted and open, to see how they handle the situation? Why does this have to be today? I'd also like to add that I don't agree that this is taking away our civil liberties. Civil liberties come with responsibility. And our responsibility as a community is to take care of our whole community and not just for maybe politics. I find this very concerning, and I would like the whole city council to really reconsider adopting this resolve. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Representative Kristen Cloutier.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Sorry. My name is Kristen Cloutier, and I live at 33 Charles Street in Lewiston. And I just want to preface my comments by saying that I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Lewiston and not in my official capacity as an employee of Bates College or as a state legislator. And I just want to start, I think, by urging each of you to be careful and thoughtful and, most importantly, informed as you consider this resolve tonight. I think the decision to reopen Androscoggin County, which is one of 4 counties in Maine with community transmission of COVID-19, and I think that that's a really important point to make, is not one that should be taken lightly or made in response to the demands of what I think is a loud minority. In a report late last week, Maine was named one of 3 states in the nation, adjusted for population, with the fastest growing number of COVID-19 cases. And new cases rose nearly 32%. And if you read Lewiston Sun Journal today, you know that Androscoggin County continues to see a steady climb in those cases. And even if you attribute that to an increase in testing, we also now know that we have more cases than previously reported. So that kind of leaves the argument for reopening that centers on the so few cases and so few deaths a little bit unable to hold water. In addition, cases continue to rise in some states where governors have been most aggressive in opening public spaces and businesses, and none of them have met the federal government's core recommendation of a 2-week decline in reported cases. So we simply don't know whether regions reporting more new cases are seeing the virus spreading more rampantly, which is why public health officials continue to urge us to wait a bit longer until we see what these trends tell us. What we do know is that gatherings with more people in closer proximity are riskier, that indoor locations, especially those with low ventilation, are riskier, that interactions with an infected person that last longer than 10 minutes are riskier. And these are all likely to happen in a rush reopening scenario. On a personal note, my husband works in healthcare, and as elective procedures were postponed, we were one of the families stuck navigating the unemployment crisis. And now that he is mostly back to work, although on a reduced schedule, we have to be more cautious than most families as we navigate public spaces like grocery stores, because regardless of how susceptible we are to the virus, he has to report to work where he sees multiple patients a day. And so we worry that we could contract the virus, be asymptomatic, or experience a delay between the time we contract the virus and exhibit symptoms, and thereby unknowingly spread it to those at higher risk. So he doesn't have the option to just stay at home, and neither do thousands of other people in this community. And I think that that statement, it really speaks from privilege. Reopening should require a demonstration of responsibility and accountability, which I think is what Ms. Scott was just getting at. And that's on the part of businesses. Many of our local small businesses are adapting to social distancing and safety guidelines, and I think that that's amazing. Many others are not, and some are not even requiring their employees to wear face masks. And my family and I actually, on a recent visit to Cumberland County, who has the same restrictions in place as we do, we felt significantly safer on a recent visit to my sister in Scarborough for a socially distanced Mother's Day, where the businesses we visited required not just their employees to wear face masks, but the customers as well, as long as they didn't have medical issues that prevented them from doing so. And I'm just kind of wondering, I guess, you know, what those of you who support this reopening would propose in terms of increased safety precautions for those businesses. And then lastly, I think that we worry that everyone is feeling so desperate to return to some sense of normal that as we start opening back up, many will abandon caution, and we're going to start seeing a surge in cases that will send us back into a shutdown, which I don't think is what any of us want, and which will be more devastating to our economy that we want so desperately to protect. And not to mention our collective physical and mental health, which should really be the priorities. So in my opinion, a slow, steady, and informed approach is both smart and responsible, and I would urge you all to vote against this resolve.
Okay, thank you very much. Steve Bannister has his hand raised. And I'll just, if I could, I'd like to remind everyone to just state your name and the town that you live in. Hi, Steve, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Thank you. Steve Bannister. I live at 385 Randall Road in Lewiston. And I'm phoning in or in support of the resolution by Ward 6 Councilor. The comments that I have is I believe if the larger box stores are fully capable and can follow direction of the state, guidelines of safe distancing, number of individuals in their square footage, I believe you could do the same thing at Webster Variety, any other facility or any other entity that needs to have walk-in revenue from individuals in the community. Individuals want to wear a mask, can wear a mask. People know how to take care of themselves. I've been selling respiratory protection for 32 years. The first thing you do, and I do this for a living, the first thing you do when you need to determine whether an individual needs to wear respiratory protection is find the contaminant level in the environment for that individual or those individuals. Second thing you need to do is you need to find out if the individual is capable of putting an obstruction over their breathing zone. And if you're not able to do that, the first recommendation should not be, here's a mask, cover your face. Temperatures are getting warmer. Individuals may not be physically fit to do those types of things. I think this should be a reasonable middle ground where you can determine as an individual a safe activity by going out to get groceries or walking to the park or whatever the case might be. I think if we have the capabilities to open and operate cannabis facilities, I sure as heck hope that all denominations can figure out ways to invite their religious in and do the same type of protections for those individuals that they do at Home Depot or Cannabis 101, whatever the heck you want to call it. I think it's ridiculous. The government today is loosening more restrictions on the lockdown. Can't believe I'm saying the lockdown. We have a virus. Viruses run their course. You can't capture the cold. You can't capture the flu. This is much more serious, much more deadly. I understand that, but I think individuals, people adapt. That's what we do as Americans. That's what we do as a country. That's what we've done since the beginning of our nation, is we adapt. We move forward. We're basing things on things that happened, in my opinion, in March. We have such a small, we have no healthcare facilities that have been overwhelmed that I know of from our, and that's based on the first, I think, 2 to 4 weeks of this. To continue to this degree any further, I have reservations, and that's why I'm supporting the resolution by Ward 6 Councilor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bannister. Any other public comments? Last call for public comments. Ms. Gagnon?
Is it okay to speak a second time?
Yeah, you're all set. Go ahead.
Okay, so Patty Gagne, 16 Bobby Street in Lewiston. Another comment, and based on what Mr. Bannister was saying, is, you know, I made a recent trip to Martin's, and there were a few people outside waiting to go in. There was only a limit of 50 people to go into Martin's, and the gentleman at the door was talking about, oh, there's this huge sale on Oreos. So my thought was, well, what if all 50 people in Martin's all head over to the Oreo section? I mean, what's the safety there? You know, so it's ridiculous to try to put all these different restrictions on when, you know, who knows if all 50 people in one establishment are going to be in one space. So we really got to leave it up to the, you know, trust the people to do what they need to do for their own protection, and just allow us the freedoms to, you know, do as we see fit and not have government restrictions on every movement. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? We won't be returning to a public comment period on this item, so just last call. So if anyone would like to chime in. Okay, Mr. Bannister. Briefly, if we could.
Are you saying long-winded? I'm just kidding. No, I just want to make a point that through this whole episode of the COVID-19, 85% of the people that contract the disease never know they have it. And 99.7% of the people that get it, even with underlying conditions, survive. Which I live in, and it's tough to be talking about things like this. It seems so insensitive, but I don't mean it that way, please. But realistically, it's time to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this last call for public comment. Okay, I don't see anything. Do you, Dennis? Okay, so I have a brief statement that I'd like to read, and then I'm going to turn it over for discussion and debate from the council. As a small business owner, I'm aware of the economic pain many of us are feeling as a result of the pandemic and the steps that the state has taken to manage it. I think, however, that this pain results from two separate but related issues: the closure orders, which are the first, the closure orders, hold on one second, which we are the first New England state to slowly relax, haven't had an impact. But we can't ignore the fact that even if all restrictions were lifted tomorrow, many businesses will continue to suffer as many members of the public prioritize their health concerns over the enjoyment of eating at a restaurant or going out to a movie or a sporting event. Many will not return to businesses as usual until they feel safe to do so. If we open too soon and cases increase, we may see a double whammy. If restrictions are returned and consumer fare rises. Closing down in many ways is easier to process than reopening, given its issues and uncertainties. While economic considerations are very important, so are the health concerns, particularly among our elderly and those with underlying conditions. In Lewiston, we have a large senior population and many residents with underlying health issues. These folks face real risk, a risk we must consider. It's important to look at data. Late last week, local healthcare providers provided information to myself and city administration that they were seeing a spike in cases, and the data seems to bear this out. If I could have staff put that chart up. The chart on the screen The chart on the screen shows the COVID trends for Androscoggin County. On this chart, the gray area represents active confirmed cases, and the blue, those that have recovered. It shows an initial growth in cases in late March, a slow increase through most of April, and then a fairly dramatic increase as we entered into May. Over the last 14 days, the total number of cases in Androscoggin County has more than doubled from 60 to 171 today. And active cases increased more than 150% from 27 to 78. These numbers should concern us and support the Maine CDC's conclusion that we are seeing community spread in Androscoggin County. One of the guidelines that the White House has issued for when it is safe to begin reopening is when there is a downward trend in documented cases within a 14-day period. Clearly, our numbers are not going down. In fact, it's the opposite. Residents have also questioned why restrictions were lifted in Kennebec County, but not Androscoggin. Here again, the data tells the story. If we can go to the next chart. Kennebec had a huge spike associated with a senior living facility. Since then, cases side comparison between Androscoggin County and Kennebec County. Next chart. Okay, I'm going to continue. Although Androscoggin, having fewer total cases than Kennebec, looks a lot more like Southern Maine hotspots in York and Cumberland County. Each of us has to review the data and weigh the risk. If we open too soon, we may see COVID spike and potentially do even greater economic damage to our community. There may be no right answer here, but history does offer us a few clues. Those areas that enacted the toughest restrictions during the Spanish flu pandemic suffered less illness, fewer deaths, and enjoyed a stronger economic recovery once the pandemic ended. And I did some research on, when this pandemic started, I did some research, and Mayor LeMaire, who was the current mayor at the time of the Spanish flu pandemic, initially was very supportive of the advice that the local health board was giving him. As time went on and pain was starting to be felt among citizens and businesses, the Monsignor of the Catholic Church and other businesses put great pressure on the mayor to reopen and allow gatherings of large crowds. Subsequently, as the Spanish flu ravaged Maine, it also did in Lewiston as well. Each of us has to review the data when we consider reopening and doing things that this council is considering today. I have one final comment. Many have claimed that these restrictions violate their rights, and clearly that is something to consider. I have no argument with those who claim the right to do risky things. I do have concerns when this risky behavior places others at risk. Along with rights, we all have responsibilities. We are not isolated individuals. We are members of a community with a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable, our seniors, and just as importantly, our neighbors who are working in the healthcare field. We have not seen our hospitals overwhelmed in Maine, but all you have to do is drive 2.5 hours south, and there are hospitals in those areas that have been overwhelmed. And I've long said that any outbreak in the Lewiston area could easily overwhelm both of our hospitals. And this just wasn't a comment that I made in jest. I've spoken to both of our hospital leaders, and they both have said very clearly that it would strain our hospitals to have an outbreak in our community. And with the uptick in numbers that we're seeing now, I believe the risk of an outbreak is real. I urge councilors to consider this resolve thoroughly before taking the vote. And I'll now turn it over to the city council for further discussion. If we can take down the screen, thank you. All right, I'll turn it over to the council. Councilor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wasn't showing up for me. Well, to just jump right into it, I know it's a touchy issue. So I just want to say firsthand that I do have a lot of respect for my colleagues. We may not agree, all of us, on this, but we are very, we work very well together. And I think it's important to mention that before we get into the debate. My take on it is we don't have all the facts. Nobody has all the facts right now. I don't think anybody in the world has all the facts right now. So even with the restrictions, we're still dealing with a lot of this, of what's happening and the upward trends that are happening in the county and in our city. There's limited testing still. We don't know if you can catch the virus again a second time. These are really unprecedented times that we live in. And I think everybody's frustrated. A few people have said the word frustrated, and I am too. I think all of us are. It's totally okay to feel that way. I completely get that. Considering this resolution itself, why should the governor reconsider her decision? What do we know that we're presenting with this resolution that she doesn't have? It's more likely that we don't have all the info, or we're not the professionals that are hired to interpret that data, the professionals with decades of experience. To me, that's important. Political resolutions are not going to change the facts on the ground. We're politicians. I really want to put the trust in the doctors and the healthcare professionals at this point. There's a potential for a second wave if we reopen too early, and that would be even worse for the economy. Just implore people to trust healthcare professionals, not politicians. Every nurse and doctor that's reached out to me has been supportive of holding back on reopening. It's just too early, and our hospitals could become overwhelmed. And the decisions that we make, we kind of have to take in extra regard, and too, because people from the other communities are going to come to us. So we're going to be overwhelmed in here regardless of what other communities do. And I don't want to see a situation like Italy or Spain where we have to turn the Colosseum into a makeshift morgue. It's just not something I ever want to even think about. And also, as mentioned earlier, it puts our healthcare workers at risk too. A lot of them have died already. A lot of postal workers too. A lot of people in many different professions have died. And so it absolutely does put healthcare workers at risk. In regards to, I do have some criticisms of the governor and the communication and the way things have gone. First, I don't think communication from the governor to our pandemic management team, of you, Mr. Mayor, the city administrator, and then the assistant city administrator. I know you guys were pushing pretty hard to increase that communication, and it's definitely on the governor's side. So that wasn't meeting my expectations, and you guys were forceful, and it seems like things are getting better. I'm happy about that. Let's see, also, I mean, I can go on a larger tangent about this, but Maine's county system is archaic. It's outdated. It just doesn't make sense to compare, to give this data out by county. Say that Lewiston and Livermore Falls should be included in the same reopening plan, to me, doesn't make much sense. You can also look at Topsom and Brunswick are in two different counties, yet they're right next to each other. Should the decision be made by county? No, I think the decision should be made by municipality or a municipality state, really. So as far as reopening too and getting data itself, I'd like to get Lewiston specific data, Auburn specific data, even Green specific data, rather than just the county itself. But I have a lot of criticisms about the way we've been getting information as well. To kind of wrap it up here, I just hope people be good to each other. Nobody's going to be perfect. People are going to make mistakes. Don't tattle. Don't chide people. Just show love. Be good to one another. It's important. And just going to wait for our duly elected governor to follow the experts, make her decision, and it's something that I fully support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jensen. Councilor Khalid.
Thank you, Mayor. I've heard from a lot of my constituents that they are in opposition to this. So, and this week we have seen a spike in cases. So I'm holding our community extra close to my heart. And that being said, I am happy to follow the guidance and expertise of the governor and the CDC. Therefore, I will not be supporting this resolution.
Thank you, Councilor Pettengill.
Thank you. I did want to point out that Councilor Clement did say that the title of the resolve should be reconsider reopening. But I wanted to kind of go in the vein of Councilor Jensen and say, what is our plan? What is Lewiston's plan? Where is our plan? We don't have one right now. Speaking for the city of Lewiston. I feel people right now would be more apt to hold in place if they knew what was going on, or if they had an idea what would be happening. I understand, and I feel pretty strongly that everybody knows that the landscape is fluid right now and does change rapidly. But we have no public plan. We aren't discussing it. The state isn't sharing data. We, as the city, are in the best possible position to be able to assist with the efforts of the state government to be able to do something about this. Now, don't get me wrong. The effort to keep everybody's head above water has been nothing short of Herculean, but it's not enough. It's not sustainable. We can't keep doing this. If COVID has taught us one thing, it's that business is no longer as usual. The things that didn't work before are now really showing the strain, and that they're not working even more. I do have faith, and I believe that almost all of you would do the right thing if needed. As so many Lewistonians have shown already, supporting their friends and neighbors and business community that call Lewiston home. From almost day one of this, I've called for transparency, and I'm continuing to do so today. Let's give our citizens the tools needed to be successful, prosperous, happy, both physically and mentally. There are certainly differing views and temperaments about reopening. I have some reservations in regards to the data from the state regarding Androscoggin County versus the other counties that have already opened. Whether or not you agree with my thoughts on reopening, it is my sincerest hope that you will agree that all levels of government should be open and transparent, especially in times of pandemic and crisis. And I did want to touch upon a couple of points that were brought up since I scribbled this down. We had to demand a sit down with the CDC. There's not a free flow of information between what we're getting. That's unconscionable. In regards to the uptick in information, when we withhold information from the public, you're going to see things like this happen because people are antsy and they don't know what's going on. Meetings like this one right here need to happen every week. We need to talk about the data, and we need to talk about it with our people. If we aren't doing this, we're allowing the people, we're allowing other people to fill that space with possibly incorrect information, whether they're intending to do so or not. And I did want to point out too, that there are more essential workers right now in our workforce than just healthcare workers. Everybody's stocking shelves at Walmart, all our grocery stores. There are tons of other frontline workers out there that are being forgotten. Not to say that healthcare isn't the shouldering the largest brunt of this. They are, without a doubt. But there's other people behind them helping them to do their job as well. And I did want to say that Councilor Jensen had some very excellent and very valid viewpoints. So to kind of echo what he said, we all do need to talk about this, and we do work pretty well generally. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know my hand goes somewhere else when you call on me, but I I have been thinking about all the different angles of this, and so my job has changed drastically in this shutdown effort, in this effort to contain the spread. But I was remembering back to when I do travel for work, and I do mention that I'm from Maine. People ask where. I say Lewiston. They say, do you know such and such person? And I often have to admit that I do, because this is such a tight-knit community. And usually it's pretty funny, but as I think about that in terms of COVID-19 and communicable disease spread, you know, it's no longer 6 degrees of separation, and it becomes that much harder to contain a disease that's spreading like wildfire. I think there was a lot of talk about rights. Oh, and I wanted to mention, so we heard from, I think, 4 or 5 folks during public comment tonight. There were also many public comments that came in through email. It sounds like we're not reading those into the record, but I did want to recognize that I saw many of them. They were shared out to the entire elected official email account. And so those were seen as well. Back to where I was. We were talking about, or folks were talking about rights earlier, and I think the mayor said it well, and it sounds like I'm shooting off his homework, but with rights do come responsibilities. And I know it's my responsibility to stay at home with or without any pre-existing risk that I have, or pre-existing conditions that I have, so that the people who do have to go out are safer. And I think it's our responsibility with the facts that we know, and they're ever evolving and they're limited and they might not be changing, but for us to be asked to go through inconveniences and try to tackle those in creative ways in order to save lives is really important. No matter what, the economy cannot replace human life. I get that it's important, and I want to be supporting our businesses, and so many of them have been very creative in the way that they're doing their work now, and they will have to continue to do so as we continue to tackle this as a community. But I think the thing that kept being shared at the beginning of this pandemic is we're going to feel stupid if we feel like nothing happened. If we look back and say, why did I stay inside for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, a year, if there were no cases, if there was no rise? And that's the whole point of this, is to prevent the spread. I feel for the people who are going through some really tough economic times. I think our city and I dare say parts of our state are working really hard to resolve that and to make people whole in the best ways that they can. But I cannot endorse this resolution tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Jelinas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to speak a little bit, just give a little background, both as a resident, but as a representative of the city. I having worked as a healthcare provider in this community for 33 years and having opened a business here in this city 24 years ago, I think I can speak from a couple of vantage points that I just want to briefly touch on. I acknowledge that this COVID-19 has resulted in some difficult times for sure. Having laid off 45 employees, now coming back and operating at less than 50%, I understand how difficult that is. And despite the blood, sweat, and tears that I put into building a business, I will say that humanity is more important to me. My staff and the care that we provide to our families, roughly 3,000 families a year, is far more important to me. I don't for a minute blame Governor Mills for what's happening to my business. I blame this horrific disease, which we as medical professionals, not as politicians, but as medical professionals, continue to learn more about every day. And I know this sounds dramatic and it's hard to probably even listen to, but this is real. I mean, I have a mother-in-law, Clover. My son's colleague, 33 years old, was diagnosed on Tuesday and died Wednesday of this disease. This is real. And maybe some of us haven't been impacted, but it's a pretty scary thing. And admittedly, my background is science, so my mind is wired that way. I completely understand the concept of flattening the curve. I completely understand the concept of community spread and the significance of transmission coming from folks who are asymptomatic. There's a lot to be said about staying in your lane and not speaking out of school, respecting decisions that have been made by those trained to make decisions pertaining to public health, Governor Mills has not made decisions absent medical counsel. She set up phases with benchmarks. In fact, those benchmarks haven't been met. Regardless, she has initiated a gradual reopening. It is my impression that, the reason the state is doing well, to Councilor Ray's points, is because of that exactly. Most importantly, I've heard from so many constituents, and with the exception of one gentleman who lives in my ward, I will say that every single email that I received strongly discouraged supporting this resolution. And despite that, I'm aware that there's a significant division and a differing of opinions that exists. This is tough. There's no easy way around that. But I think we're going to get through it. Lastly, I just want folks to know who have voiced their either support or opposition of this resolution. I'm thinking about Mr. Bannister. I'm thinking about Representative Clucci. I want them to know that I will bring their thoughts. I sit on the Public Health Committee for the City of Lewiston, and I fully intend to bring their thoughts. There's some great thoughts shared tonight to that committee. But I won't be supporting tonight's resolution.
Okay, thank you. Councilor LaJoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to commend Councilor Clements for bringing this up. I think it's something that is sincere and is worthwhile bringing up. And the reason I say that is I know citizens within our city, and more than likely Androscoggin County, who may be listening this evening, also feel that it's time that we had a very serious conversation with regards as to how we see things in the business atmosphere, as well as citizen health atmosphere. I guess with the resolution, I read through it a few times, and I spotted some areas which, as far as information from the CDC, I know that administration, yourself, Ed, and Dennis, this past weekend spent quite a bit of time with CDC, the governor, I believe, and others in regards to conversation as to where we stand. And I think that's very important. And I think that's pertinent information that came to us that is worthwhile. It's hard for me to decipher if they're giving us all the information, part of the information, or no information. When I listened to the good doctor at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and others within our state, I feel that they're very thorough in their explanation. And I feel, I guess, more comfortable with the information that I've received, feeling that it was worthwhile. The other thing, I had a couple of things here. There's so many things. I do agree with all the conversations that have transpired through the city councilors this evening. Certainly, Councilor Pettengill hits the nail on the head many, many times, as well as Councilor Clements. However, I do see the other side as far as the health aspect. The other thing I guess I'd like to bring up is that on national news this evening, they're talking about a virus, not a virus, a vaccine that has extreme potential and is moving forward quite quickly, which may change the picture completely as we go along, and may also change it sooner than we may think. And as an example of that, this afternoon, the announcement was made that campgrounds in areas as such can open, which is something that had not happened. And the basis for that is the pertinent information that they have been receiving which made it possible to make that decision. Let's see, vaccine, the health, the Public Health Committee. I attended a meeting, a Zoom meeting yesterday with the Health Committee, you and I, as a matter of fact, and I thought that was extremely interesting and with excellent conversation as well. So all in all, I think what is happening is, from what I can see, and is that we're moving ahead from 2 weeks ago. We're moving ahead quicker than we were previously. And that's based on, number one, the number of tests that can be taken now, and also new information that may be coming out with the vaccines, as well as the abilities for areas to open up quicker. This evening on TV, there was a small businessman from down south that stated that he is not opening, even though he would be given permission, and that he was for the 14-day situation that the individuals have to stay inside if they come from out of state. So it shows that small businesses, as well as others, have those thoughts in mind. And it's not only the economical or money-making aspect that they're looking at, they're also looking at the health of their constituents or the citizens that come to their place every day to spend money. So again, I commend Councilor Clements for coming out with this. It was a needed conversation that I feel very comfortable with. And I believe that you will hear that on the streets tomorrow, and you may even hear it in emails. However, I will say, as much as I would like to go along with it, I believe I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Clement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard a lot tonight. I do commend those people who bothered to attend our meeting. As I told you in a conversation earlier today, had this been held in chambers, they've probably been standing room only. I know it's an issue that's near and dear to the hearts of many people, but I'd like to speak tonight. It's my resolution. Obviously, I'm going to endorse it, but contrary to common belief, the resolution does not support the Androscoggin County Commission's recent action. It does not demand the governor open Maine up or, as the agenda states, seek to reopen Maine. It only respectfully asks the governor to reconsider her recent decision to keep the city of Lewiston and Androscoggin County included in that 4-county group that remains subject to the strictest regulations ever enacted in the state of Maine. Such restriction is in no way rationally related to a virus that does not recognize or respect geographical boundaries. Does coronavirus stop at the Greentown line before it reaches Monmouth? Does it stop in Livermore Falls and not enter Jay? Does it remain in Wales and not move on to Litchfield? Does it hold up in Turner and not go to Buckfield? Wait in Sabattis and not proceed to Bowdoin? To those who say that the incidence of COVID-19 is increasing, I would not disagree. There is sufficient evidence that increased testing will also reveal a significant increase in the total number of cases. But just remember this, there is a significant number of totally asymptomatic persons out there as well. Currently, even with the so-called uptick in experiences, that still amounts to only 0.0013% of the county's population of over 108,000 citizens. To date, there have been 71 deaths in the state of Maine, only 2 in Androscoggin County. And these may not be due or as a result of COVID, but rather they're now classified as with COVID. But most likely, any number of comorbidity factors precipitated the actual demise. Maine averages 31.2 deaths per day, according to the latest data publicly available from the Maine CDC. Every death is indeed a tragedy. But couldn't we utilize our efforts and make a greater impact on another category of mortality? The largest causes of death annually in Maine are cancer at 3,391 persons, heart disease at 2,824, the lowest homicide at 19. Based on this year's figures, we could expect that COVID deaths might amount to roughly 10% of the total deaths due to drug overdose in the state. I fear the economic and psychological damage being perpetrated on our citizens is likely to become irreparable. Already, there are palpable signs of civil disobedience and downright defiance across Maine. The city of Calais, through its mayor and city council, voted last Thursday 6-1 to defy the governor's order and reopen their city in an attempt to forestall what they see as economic calamity. Councilor Michael Sherrod, in addressing that body, said, "We need to let our businesses run and make money and support their families. We need to get the Little League going. We need to get the rec department going. We need to get everything going and get back and use common sense. Let the parents decide whether or not they want their kids to participate. If they don't, that's fine. But the entire population cannot suffer like this because of something that is less lethal than the flu that we get every year." Elsewhere, individual business owners are disobeying what they see as unjust and unnecessary restriction that are penalizing the healthy. Some have had licenses revoked. They continue to remain open in defiance. If it gets to the point where sufficient numbers decide to disobey, do we risk confrontation? Or will that threat be enough to finally cause reflective circumspection on the part of those standing at the helm? The Spanish flu epidemic of the last century, arguably worse than the current coronavirus evolution, did not result in the United States or the state of Maine being shut down as we are now. This resolution also makes some logical suggestions for our governor's consideration, suggestions which I feel will allow us to rationally analyze data that is collected as a result of the expanded testing which we strongly endorse. Data that is routinely collected in other jurisdictions and even shared with local governments there. Such was not the case here in Lewiston until our administration literally had to demand a meeting with state officials in an effort to find out just what was going on here in Lewiston. While I'm not proposing any constitutional argument here, there are many to be made concerning the legality of the actions being taken. The Wisconsin State Supreme Court just struck down some of the restrictions made by their governor. In Oregon yesterday, a judge nullified their governor's restrictions. My intent is not to demand or defy the state, even though I question the legitimacy of the current lockdown. I'm not demanding we tell the governor to open Maine up. I'm not demanding we tell her anything. I'm merely asking my colleagues to respectfully, and I emphasize that tone, respectfully, ask that the governor reconsider her decision. Do we not deserve her respect when we, as is our constitutional right, ask her to address our concerns? As I've said, I truly fear the negative efforts of this continued restriction will create irreparable harm to our city and state. I cannot, in good conscience, sit back and not at the least start a dialogue that will question this doctrine of competing harms. I do not wish to make this a political argument, but rather one of rationality and common sense. I do not want to be remembered for not having the courage of my convictions. I've heard from the community that this council is a rubber stamp, that we decide everything behind closed doors, and there's never any debate. Perhaps they don't recognize how our public workshops are designed to resolve conflict before we have our regular stated meetings. I'm not sure there's been any issue thus far in my term which has invoked such a desire for passionate advocacy, but this definitely is it. I feel strongly I'm not ashamed to stand up and ask for some sanity. To those who proclaim that we can't rush into this headlong, I reiterate we would only be asking the governor to look things over and see if there's a reason to reconsider. I mean, June is coming up. Maybe things are going to change. Maybe we can do something. In every instance where states have reopened, there has not been one single state where there's been a surge in COVID cases. I ask you, my elected colleagues, to think long, hard, and carefully before you cast your vote on this issue. Your constituents and mine will be looking over our collective shoulders. They'll remember, when all is said and done, who stood on their side of this issue, which assaults not only our lives and liberties, but also our very common sense. Vote as is your obligation to represent the best interests of your constituents and the city of Lewiston. Remember, we have committed as a body to engage in positive economic development. How can we look in the mirror and say that's been our record if we can't even ask this perfectly calm, respectful question? I thank you for your time. I hope I've solicited your support. I ask you not to let the city of Lewiston down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Clements. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Ray.
It looks like a member of the public may have joined after we had closed the public comment and has had their hand raised throughout our entire remarks. I just was wondering if we might go back there. Up to you, Mr. Mayor.
And you think he joined after?
I was looking at the list as we were going through and I thought I saw that name pop up, but I may be wrong.
Yeah.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me?
Point of order.
Go ahead.
I believe you closed the public comment period some time ago after announcing several times that it was the last call.
And I would agree, but I also at the start of the meeting made it very clear that the public could chime in late. And I guess I would struggle going back on that as well, because it's not like a typical city council meeting where people are right in front of us. So Dennis, let's bring him in. It's going to be very brief comments on Mr. Nyjean's. Hi, Josh, if you can hear me, go ahead. I'm going to ask that you be very brief because we ended public comment on this discussion a while back.
My apologies, Mr. Mayor. I did not mean to raise my hand. I just joined the meeting late.
Thank you. So your hand's not raised, you're all set?
I am, indeed.
Thank you, sir. All right, back to the council. With nothing showing, call the roll. And you're on mute, Kathy.
Thank you. Councilor from Ward 3?
No.
Ward 4?
No.
Ward 5?
No.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
No.
Ward 1?
No.
And Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion did not pass, received a vote of 2 to 5, so it failed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8, please.
Item number 8, order authorizing execution of municipal quitclaim deed for real estate located at 42 Reike Street and 186 Bartlett Street. Requested action to approve the orders authorizing execution of municipal quitclaim deeds for real estate located at 42 Reike Street and 186 Bartlett Street.
Okay, and if we can bring in. Oh, I'm sorry. Moved by Councilor Ray. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Councilor Khalid. And if we can get Heather, who I believe is presenting on this.
It appears Heather is having some technical difficulties, so.
I can take care of it very quickly. These are just typical quitclaim deeds for people who got behind on their taxes or some other payment to the city where we had a lien placed on the property that has matured. This just, they've paid the amounts due to us. This just clears their title and takes care of the property for sure being back in their hands.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Councilor from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
And Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 9, reports and updates. Councilor Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The school committee met last night. One very important piece of information is there will be a graduation forum held tomorrow night at 6 p.m. via Zoom, in which they will be discussing the options available for the class of 2020's graduation from Lewiston High School. I know this is a very important subject for many members of our community, so I'd encourage them to attend. It sounds like there will be a panel of folks who are talking about the options, and then there might be ways for people to participate either through chatting or polls or Q&A. I'm not quite sure of the exact features of that Zoom meeting, but available online. I definitely encourage folks to take a look at that. We also handled, we received a presentation from the Lewiston Expansion Committee, which you'll remember that voters approved that bond back, gosh, not this November. Was it this November? It was. And so there were some beautiful drawings and images of what that new wing at the Lewiston High School will look like. So I'd encourage folks to look at that as well. We also received and approved the recommendations of teacher evaluation and professional growth program adjustments. In the times of COVID-19, it's not exactly the same sort of evaluation for educators in Lewiston public school systems that we normally do, but we've received some recommendations from the state as well as our chief academic officer, and we've adopted those.
Okay, thank you. Just briefly, you might want to share the information about the parents discussing the graduation with Dottie, and maybe she can post something on the Facebook page as well.
We can absolutely do that.
All right. Any other reports or updates from the council? Okay, agenda item number 10, any other city business councilors or others may have relating to Lewiston city government? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Ray has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Good, Councilor
There's got to
Ray.
be something weird about our screens. I was just hoping to ask the city clerk if she may share information now that it has been voted that there will be one polling location and we are likely going to push absentee voting. Could you share the information that we have about that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yes, so July 14th will be the state primary election as well as a state referendum election, a bond issue, and a broadband expansion question, and also the school budget election. So the polling place, if allowed by the governor, will be the Longley Elementary School. Polls would open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. But given the pandemic and in an effort to keep community members safe, the city is encouraging people to consider absentee voting if they are interested in voting in this election. We do not have ballots in hand yet. That has nothing to do with the pandemic. On a standard election, we don't have absentee ballots until 30 days prior to election day. So we're not expecting the absentee ballots until mid-June. However, voters are welcome to request their absentee ballots now, and there's a couple of ways they can do that. They can call the city clerk's office and request their ballot over the phone. We'll take their order over the phone. They can go to the city's website and find the link to go to the state website, and they can request it online that way. There are also paper applications that people can fill out and either mail in or deposit in the city's drop box in front of City Hall. So we're strongly encouraging people, if they're interested in voting in this election, to please consider absentee voting for the safety of the community overall, the other voters themselves and the election workers. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have or others may have, Councilor Ray. Thanks.
Any questions for the city clerk?
I just have one additional question about this topic.
Go ahead.
If folks are interested in applying to be poll workers, what are the requirements and where can they find that information?
Sure, thank you. So the state law does define the requirements. They need to be a registered voter. They should be a resident of Lewiston or the county. So most of our workers are registered voters of Lewiston. So as such, they would need to be 18 years old or older. They would contact the city clerk's office. We have an application on the city's website. They can go to the lewistonmaine.gov and then look for the election page. And there's all kinds of information about the July 14th election on there. And also on there is an an election worker application form. The duties are basically most duties that you'd see at the polling place. When people walk in, they would check voters in. Then other workers would distribute ballots. Then other workers would be at the voting machines. We are still working out what additional positions we need as a result of the pandemic, such as sort of a traffic control person if there are lines in the hallway, and asking people to please social distance and be mindful of that. We also need people to help us process absentee ballots on the Saturday before the election, which means opening the envelopes and folding the ballots and inserting those through the voting machine. We are looking at the social distancing and CDC safety requirements for that. We're expecting all the workers to wear gloves and face masks and so forth. So if anyone's interested, they can certainly reach out to the city clerk's office and we'll be happy to walk them through the process from there. So thank you, Councilor.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clement.
I kind of missed my opportunity a moment ago. Can I back up to reports? I have a question for Councilor Ray, if I might.
Yeah, absolutely.
If she might, whether or not, I don't know, Councilor, whether or not you can update us as to what the school committee and school department are talking about. Are there any plans with regards to school this fall? I mean, I know we're using the middle school as part of a wellness shelter. Obviously, there are concerns about a whole number of things. Today, the state of Virginia was talking about having to do distance learning for the next school year for the entire state, unless they can come up with a plan to have only 10 or 12 students in the classroom. I mean, some of this stuff, it's just incredulous. And I don't know, what we're planning on doing here. I can't see having a no school year in the city. I think this would create tremendous damage to the students. I have 4 grandchildren, and there have been altogether different reactions in the various school districts they're in. One didn't do anything for over a month, and then they kind of said, well, here's a workbook, you can look at this. Others have had structured online learning. I'm just wondering what we're looking at here, if you have any information. Thank you.
Councilor Ray, anything on next school year?
Absolutely. So we are undertaking a school committee retreat on, I believe the date is June 13th, one of our all-day Saturday retreats. And under that topic of discussion, we will be talking about what summer school looks like, what the fall looks like. We were given an update that we will be receiving additional digital devices to deploy to students, teachers, educators. But we do not currently have a plan, but we have a plan to make a plan is probably the most succinct way to say it at this point.
Okay. A plan to make a plan.
Good bureaucratic answer.
All right, any other questions or comments or on other city business? Okay, if not this time for real, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Clement.
Second.
Second.
Luke, you're just a little slow. Seconded by Alicia Ray. Call the roll?
Sure. Council from Ward 3?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Absolutely.
Ward 7?
Ward 7?
Yes.
Thank you. Ward 1?
Yes.
And Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, folks, and have a good evening.
Great, thank you.